So Greg Hunt will be making the call on the Aged Care Emergency Response Operations Centre if that's mobilised. What are your thoughts on what's going on politically?
Look, my and our concerns are primarily the well-being of older Australians, and I don't want to get into the details of politics. And with respect to your good self, can I say that I'm cautious about commenting on newspaper articles that aren't sourced? Look, I would expect both ministers are involved. When the Victorian Response Centre was announced, it was announced by Minister Hunt. He's the Cabinet Minister in the portfolio. I can tell you without any political concerns that while I understand the politics of the minister's lack of capacity to give numbers last Friday, that the minister has been all over the government's response. We are in meeting after meeting with the minister. He's across the detail of what's happening. He's been a fearsome advocate within government for the sector, and not always fully appreciated by the sector. So I have no trouble working with him. He has a deep concern about when things have gone wrong and making sure that we don't have more of that.
So do you feel like the apology was genuine, and if what you're saying is working so hard, was it necessary in the end?
Oh, well, the minister apologised for not having the numbers at his fingertips, which clearly he should have had. What I'm saying is the focus has to be on making sure that we don't get the kind of outbreaks that we have seen in Victoria. They're coming down. We want to make sure that does not happen elsewhere in Victoria, does not happen in other states. I just would also like to make a point here that I think is often not being given full attention. The government regulates and funds aged care in this country, the federal government, and the health system is effectively run, both co-funded by both governments, but run by the states. But the provision, the running of aged care, is actually run by aged care providers. And we have seen a lot of aged care providers doing really well in this pandemic. We have seen the vast majority of nursing homes in Victoria that have COVID controlling it very well. They can't necessarily stop it getting in because staff are working when they're asymptomatic, but they've controlled it. We have seen some that have not coped. And yes, I think that the Commonwealth has learnt that it's actually got to be much more on its tiptoes, ready for the fact that you can't always tell which ones of them are not going to be able to cope.
So, Ian, are you confident that the sector will be able to handle future outbreaks if and when they occur?
I think the sector is better equipped, but I think it's really... it depends also on the context. If you have really major community transmission, it's a real challenge. I think the sector is better set up than it was. But look, there are short-term and long-term things here. And is this a sector that's vulnerable because it's under-resourced? Yes. Government after government have not resourced aged care. Have we got too many people in residential care, which makes them extremely vulnerable when people prefer to be in home care and we need a lot more home care places? Yes, that's true. Do we need better staffing and better funding of that staffing? Yes, that's true. Governments have had reports for many years on that. These things are all true, and we are looking to the Royal Commission to provide an impetus to fix that. But we're saying clearly to the government, don't wait for that. You know you've got to fix home care. You know you've got to do more, and the sector has to do more about staffing. These are things that don't need to wait for the Royal Commission.
Well, I mean, we're just looking at some pictures of Newmarch House there. You had that independent review that came out, Ian, and it found shortcomings in infection control in the early period, and the plan to treat COVID-positive patients in the home was compromised by, as you mentioned there, inadequate staffing. I'm going to go right ahead here and say that you probably weren't that surprised by those findings.
No, and we have certainly seen that the sector and government have learnt from the Newmarch experience. I think we've seen in Victoria that the regulator has been prepared to move in faster and make stronger decisions. We think the regulator needs a better range of powers, and that's been on the table for quite some time too. And we also think that government's got to, bite the bullet on the fact that there's been a cosy relationship for too many years between providers and governments that have let too many poor providers survive and has not allowed the better providers who are coping well with this to grow and develop. They've had recommendation after recommendation to move. They've even decided to do that in principle, but they haven't done it. So there are these major structural issues that make the sector weaker than it should be. But, I think in terms of managing outbreaks, let me again appeal around the country. The really critical thing is to make sure we get community transmission down and keep it down. If there's not nursing homes, if there's not COVID in the street, it won't be in a nursing home.
Okay. Ian Yates, thank you for your time as always. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks.